months. So student loan payments have been waived for 6 months, and we'll discuss it after that. May go further. Although this medical war has separated our citizens for a period of time, it's also united our entire nation. I think I can say, like almost never before, Americans are moving forward with common purpose and shared resolve, determined to vanquish the virus and lift our nation to even greater heights. We are supremely confident in the magnificent future that awaits the American people. And with that, before I invite our Vice President, our great Vice President, and Gene Scalia to speak, we'll take a few questions, and then I'm going back into negotiations on oil and on airlines. Yeah, please.
Talk a little bit more about your conversation with President Putin and the King.
Yeah, I had a very good conversation.
Did you organize that call, and do they understand the problems they're causing with
Yeah,
the oil output
yeah.
situation?
No, there's so much production, nobody even knows what to do with it. That's how it's working. And Saudi Arabia and, as you know, Russia, it's well known that we're producing a lot, and they were perhaps fighting with each other over the production and the amount of oil being produced. And frankly, there's not enough room to even store it. Our storage is now full, going to be very soon. Our strategic national storage is, I said, this is a great time to fill it up, load it up with oil that frankly is at pricing that nobody's ever seen before. I don't think we've seen this probably since the 1950s. That was with big dollars. So we'll see what happens. The conversation was very good. They're getting close to a deal. That's OPEC and many other countries outside of OPEC, and we'll see what happens.
Are they still fighting with each other?
No, I think they were getting along very well. We had a very good call. I think it was a very good call. We're going to see what happens, but it was a very good call. They'll probably announce something either today or tomorrow, one way or the other. Could be good, could be not so good, but I think one way or the other. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, Mr. President, how could the administration discuss the possibility of reopening the country when the administration does not have an adequate nationwide testing system for this virus? Don't you need a nationwide testing
No.
system for the virus before you reopen the country?
We have a great testing system. We have the best, right now, the best testing system in the world. But there are certain sections.
Test right now.
There are certain sections in the country that are in phenomenal shape already. Other sections are coming online. Other sections are going down. And we, in addition to that, are giving out millions of tests. And every day we're doing it exponentially. We're picking up. And what we'll be doing in the very near future is going to certain areas of our country and do massive testing. It's not necessary, but it would be a good thing to have.
Don't you need that, though, Mr. President, to make sure people are safe going back to work? You don't want to send people back to the workplace.
We want to have it, and we're going to see if we have it. Do you need it? No. Is it a nice thing to do? Yes. We're talking about 325 million people, and that's not going to happen, as you can imagine. And no, it would never happen with anyone else either. Other countries do it, but they do it in a limited form. We'll probably be the leader of the pack. Please.
Mr. President, what do you say to the 16 million Americans, more than 16 million Americans who have lost their jobs in the last 3 weeks and fear that the economy won't just bounce back, like you said?
Well, I think the economy is going to do very well. Now, that's just my feeling. It's a strong feeling. I've had good, proper feelings about a lot of things over the years, and I think we're going to do well. We're doing it looks like we're at the lower end of the curve in terms of death, which is a terrible word, a terrible dark word that we've experienced like nobody's ever seen before in this country. I mean, we have numbers that are terrible, but when you look at the lower levels of 100, lower prediction levels of 100, 120,000 to 220,000, or if we did nothing, up to 2.2 million people, we're looking at a much lower level than the level of, I hope, than the level of 100,000. So we're going to see. We're going to have to. You can never do anything about the people that lost their loved ones and lost their friends, and I mean the great friendships. And I'm not sure a lot of people will ever be the same, but I think our country, from an economic standpoint, will end up being stronger than ever. We have tremendous stimulus. We have tremendous stimulus plans. We have things in the works that are going to really, I think, fire the country. I think that what's going to happen is we're going to have a big bounce rather than a small bounce. But we will be back, and I think, honestly, I think our country is going to be back from an economic standpoint, again, you can never replace the people that were lost, and to their families, certainly you can never do a thing like that. But we will have succeeded in many ways, hopefully keeping the number way below our minimum numbers, and also from an economic standpoint. You know, we met with the mental health people today, and that takes this is taking a tremendous toll mentally on a lot of people. And I think we're going to open up strong. I think we're going to open up very successfully. And I'd like to say even more successfully than before. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Oil is trading today at about $23 a barrel
Yeah.
in New York. Where would you want to see the price? Do you want it at $30, $40, $50 a barrel?
Well, I want to see it where there's a certain market, but I also don't want to see it where people have no idea. You know, we'll be opening up areas for storage of oil, massive areas for storage of oil, because oil today is not selling. And what happened is the virus knocked out 40% of the market. Immediately, you know that, you know the number, 40%. Now, there was a lot of oil, but it was very controllable. All of a sudden, they lost 40%. You look at the roads, you look at the car, you look at what's going on. There's nobody driving. There's no reason for it right now. That'll start coming back. But we are storing millions of barrels of oil that nobody thought would even be possible. Frankly, ships turned out to be a good business for some people because they're filling up tankers, sending them out to sea and not saying where to go. They're just sitting out there loaded up with oil. So we want to save our energy in this country. We want to make sure that our energy companies, businesses, and employees, workers, remain strong. So that's how I'm involved. And I think that's going to happen. So right now, if you look, you're probably talking 23, 25. If they announce a deal, we can get it up. We need a minimum number so the companies don't go out of business. So they're not going to lay off all of these energy workers who are important to our country. And, you know, we're now energy independent. We could do something where we only used our oil. But I think the long-term benefit is to be able to just go with the market. And it's going to work out. It's all going to work out. If you looked at 3 weeks ago, as you know, because we talked about it, 3 weeks ago and 2 weeks ago, this was catastrophic. I think it's really hitting bottom, and I think that, I mean, we've had a bottom, but now at $23 and $25 and probably heading up. At the same time, we save our energy, and we also produce great, cheap energy, and we save our jobs. Yeah.
I want to ask you about the Paycheck Protection Program, because every day we're hearing from small business owners who are telling us that their banks don't know how to access this money, they're trying to apply, they can't figure it out. So where does the fault lie? Does it lie with the banks?
I don't think there's a fault. They're doing record numbers of dollars. They're dealing with many community banks. They're dealing with Bank of America, Citibank, a lot of Wells Fargo, as you know, is very much involved. And they're dealing with the bankers. Can't go that quickly, but I'm hearing it's a very, very successful rollout. They did want changes in applications. They want changes in loan requirements, et cetera. But they're taking billions and billions of dollars worth of loans. And in the very near future, the banks will be relieving the money. They'll be paying out the money. Yeah, please.
Sure. Are you still expecting the USMCA to take effect on July 1st? And considering the fact that the auto industry is hurting these days, are you ready to postpone the
Well, we have a
application of the
deal.
new rules?
Yeah, the deal is with Canada. The deal is with Mexico. We have a deal. And obviously, the deal is different from the standpoint that production will be lower. But we have a deal. It's a signed deal. It's a deal that's one of the worst deals that we've ever had was NAFTA, one of the worst trade deals ever made by any country anywhere. And we'll be terminating that. And the new deal is a great deal for our country. So that's something. Now, again, we get hit by the virus, and we'll see where that all goes. But certainly car production is going to be down for a little while. But ultimately, good for our farmers, great for our farmers. We'll be helping our farmers, by the way. We have money going out to our farmers in the pretty near future having to do with, you see what's happened. The farmers got hurt very badly by all of this. People are eating less from the standpoint that there's no restaurants are open, no businesses are open, no hotels are open. they'll start to come back. But we're going to be helping out our farmers. Yeah, please.
All the new auto
ahead.
regulations.
Thank you, sir. Philip Wegman, Real Clear Politics. Earlier, you mentioned Project Skybridge, and we're hearing that through that project, a lot of the PPE that was sent out to other countries is coming back to this country. Do you know when we will be able to bring a majority of that back? And then, are you frustrated that USAID allowed a lot of that aid to go out the door in the first place? Should they have brought it
no,
back?
I'm not,
before?
because we're in very good shape. You'll be speaking with Mike Pence about this in a little while. You look at the hospitals, you look at what's going on. Yesterday I spoke with the governor of Louisiana. I'm saying, do you think we need that extra 1,000 beds that we're in the process of building? We are really in good shape. You're not hearing people are needing ventilators much. In fact, we're going to start helping other countries with ventilators. We're going to end up having a lot of ventilators for future should something happen for hospitals, ideally to keep and have. But no, I think we're in very, very good shape. We have calls with governors all the time, and the governor's in very good shape now. We have sent billions and billions and billions of dollars between ventilators, equipment, protective equipment, masks. We have 500 million masks coming. 500 million from one group. 500. It'll be 300 million and 200 million over a short period of time. No, I think we're in very good shape. Please.
President, speaking of testing, some experts, including Scott Gottlieb, have talked about 750,000 tests per week being needed before the economy is opened. Can you address that? Do you agree with those numbers? If not, how many tests per week do you think we should have before the economy is open?
I don't like
sir?
using the word needed because I don't think it's needed, but I think we're going to try and hit a number like that. That's a very high number, but we're going to be trying to hit it. And we probably might be able to do that. Please, go ahead.
Do that, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, the Democrats pushed for more rescue money for states and hospitals, which are complaining that they need it to fight the coronavirus pandemic. Do you think hospitals and states need this money? Would you support
I do,
something
and I
like that?
do support something, but I support it for the next phase. It's much simpler in the next phase, whether that phase is infrastructure or whatever. So I'm going to leave you now with Mike Pence and with Eugene Scalia, and if you would, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow. We have I think, a lot of very big news to report. We've had a tremendous day between, I believe, what's happening with the energy industry, and I believe what's happening with airlines. I look forward to seeing you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. At the present moment, we have now cleared more than 2 million tests across the country. And I'm pleased to report we're testing more than 100,000 people a day now. But we're working around the clock to scale up the new types of tests that the FDA has approved in record time. And every American can be confident that we'll continue to build out that structure going forward for the weeks ahead and the months ahead. At the present moment, there's more than 450,000 Americans who have tested positive for the coronavirus, and sadly, more than 16,000 Americans have lost their lives. And as President Trump just said, our hearts go out to the families that have lost loved ones. And I want to assure you that all of us working at every level understand these are not numbers, these are lives. And our heartfelt condolences during this heartbreaking week go out to every American family that's lost a loved one to the coronavirus. It has been a difficult week. But as Dr. Birx will reflect in just a few moments, as we look at the data literally on a county-by-county basis every day, we continue to see evidence that in areas where the epidemic has impacted most, the greater New York City area, Louisiana, the Detroit metro, the Denver metro, we continue to see evidence of stabilization. And it appears, as Dr. Birx suggests, that we are close to the peak in each of those areas so impacted. We also express gratitude and appreciation for the people of California and Washington State who continue to be low and steady in the number of cases that are emerging there. We're watching the Chicago metro area, we're watching the Boston metro area, and as Dr. Birx will discuss, we just continue to urge every American to put into practice the President's coronavirus guidelines, because all evidence indicates from the West Coast to what we're beginning to see in major outbreak areas on the East Coast, it's working, America. And it's working because you're doing it. And we encourage you onward in that. Today, the White House Coronavirus Task Force met, but most of the team also met with Republicans and Democrats in two separate conference calls of the United States Senate. Secretary Mnuchin, our health experts, Admiral Polovchek, Dr. Hahn joined us as we discussed a broad range of issues. The Treasury Secretary touched on the Paycheck Protection Program, now in day 5. Reporting $125 billion has been approved so far. 30,000 new individual users and 3,900 lenders are participating. We also discussed that the Treasury Department will issue a new frequently asked question document tonight, an FAQ as they're known, to clarify how seasonal businesses can participate in the Paycheck Protection Program as well. With regard to direct payments to Americans, the Treasury Secretary assured senators, and we assure every American, that we remain on a timetable where the first payments in direct deposits will go out by the end of next week. For the average family of 4, that'll be $3,400 in direct financial support, and will no doubt be welcome news. Anyone who is interested in additional information on any of these programs can go to treasury.gov or sba.gov. Since we last spoke, I spoke with Governor Laura Kelly of Kansas, Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky, also spoke to governors of Texas and Rhode Island. I assured each one of them, as we continue to work through the process of making sure that we distribute the resources at the point of the need, is that at President Trump's direction, our objective working through FEMA is to make sure that states have what they need when they need it. And to see the progress that we've made, the President just reflected on in New York and New Jersey, Louisiana, and the partnership we forged with governors in those states, California and Washington State before. We trust gives confidence to governors and leaders of states across the country, most importantly our dedicated healthcare workers, that we will be there to meet that need should that need arise. At the present moment, FEMA reports the President has approved 54 major disaster declarations, and states around the country have stood up 29,000 National Guard, 11,000 of which are fully funded by the federal government under Title 32. Also, speaking of our military, at the present moment, we received a report today from the Department of Defense that 4,100 active duty military medical personnel have been deployed in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And they are personnel that are working on the ground at the Javits Center, working, of course, at the USNS Comfort ship. But because at the present moment, the utilization of both of those temporary facilities has been fairly modest. The DOD actually worked with the city of New York to establish what amounts to a uniform temp service. They called it the bullpen. And today they literally deployed from the ship and from the Javits Center 75 medical personnel to relieve dedicated healthcare workers within the hospital system in the city of New York, and we'll continue to do that. We're going to make sure those federal temporary hospital and Javits Center is fully staffed. We'll make sure the USNS Comfort is staffed, but the physicians, those military personnel, are going to also be deployed across the city to bring much needed relief to our healthcare workers in our system. From the VA standpoint, we've opened up VA facilities in New York City, East Orange, New Jersey, Detroit, Michigan, and we are opening up the VA facility to coronavirus patients in Shreveport, Louisiana. Finally, I mentioned that today we exceeded more than 2 million tests that have been performed across the country. And also, literally, working with the U.S. Public Health Service, states around the country have stood up hundreds of drive-through testing sites. And just this week, FEMA and the U.S. Public Health Service announced that we will give an option to states to transition from a federal testing site, dozens of which have been assembled around the country, to a state-managed site. I want to emphasize that this is an option. We believe it gives states greater flexibility to style sites or manage sites in areas that they think are most important. But we're also processing requests for continued federal participation in states from New Jersey to Louisiana to Illinois, Colorado, and Texas. And we want to assure people in communities all across the country that we'll continue to partner with states to the extent that they prefer us to be a part of it. With regard to the air bridge, 3 flights were scheduled to arrive today in Chicago, New York, and Dallas-Fort Worth. 49 flights are scheduled over the next 3 days. And we continue to work supplies. We continue to literally leave no stone unturned around America and around the world. We're literally in the process of acquiring tens of millions of supplies that are being brought into a distribution system organized out of FEMA and focused on the areas most in need. We're also bringing real innovation, and at the White House Coronavirus Task Force today, we tasked the FDA and CMS to review the feasibility of allowing hospital workers to use cloth gowns for performing procedures. It was observed that 20 years ago, most physicians and most surgeons wore cloth gowns every day and laundered them, but it's transitioned to disposable gowns, and we're working very rapidly in the next 24 hours, and we'll have guidance for hospitals and healthcare workers about the ability to in effect recycle gowns and make sure that we have the supplies that we need. As the President mentioned today, the President and the First Lady and I and my wife Karen we're honored to be a part of a conference call with mental health professionals from all around the country. And we know while there are families that are struggling with the coronavirus and struggling with heartbreaking loss to the coronavirus, we understand this is a very challenging time for every American, but most especially Americans who struggle with mental disorders or struggle with addiction. And the President brought some incredibly dedicated people together to make sure that they know we're with them. Early on, the President expanded access to telemedicine, and we've also issued guidance for using technology to remain connected to social support groups. And we just urge everyone who may be feeling an emotional burden or a vulnerability during this time to reach out to the many resources that are there, and to know that you're not alone, that we're with you, and we'll get through this, and we'll get through this together. So despite heartbreaking losses that continue this week in communities from New York to New Jersey to Louisiana, there are signs of progress, and hope abounds. The reality is that we see new projections from the experts, and if the projections are right, it's because it's working, America. It's because the American people are putting into practice the social distancing, caring for their neighbors and their loved ones and their family members, and putting their health first. And we just want to urge every American to continue to put those principles and guidelines into practice every day. With that, I'm going to invite Dr. Deborah Birx up for an update. And Dr. Fauci will hear from the Secretary of Labor, and we'll take a few questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So I wanted to cover today not only what we're seeing across the United States, but some of the testing data to assure from the prior question, if we're testing, I'm sure you're following our numbers every day, and the amount we're going up, about 118,000 to 120,000 per day are being tested. So we're way over the 750,000 per week currently. We have some statistics. Now remember, we required this, thanks to Congress, to be reported. We have about 75% of that test data in now. About 1.5 million of those tests have been reported in. I just wanted to give you some ideas because sometimes we think that we're only testing in the hospitals, that this should give you an idea of the quantity and the types of tests that have occurred. So we've tested over 200,000 young people up to age 25. They have about 11% positivity rate. Over 500,000 people between 25 and 45. They have a 17% positive rate. Now remember, in order to get tested, you have to have symptoms. So this gives you an idea of the number of people who have symptoms that are not infected with coronavirus. Another nearly 500,000 people between 45 and 65, their positivity rate is 21%. Another nearly 200,000 between 65 and 85, 22% positive, and a small group of about 30,000+ individuals over 85, and they have a 24% positivity rate. And so this gives you an idea of we're testing throughout all age categories. I see a lot of men in the audience today. I just want to remind them about the importance of healthcare. Of the male-female ratio, 56% of the people who are tested are female, 16% positive, 44% male, 23% positive. So again, it gives you an idea about how men often don't present in the healthcare delivery system until they have greater symptomatology. This is to all of our men out there, no matter what age group. If you have symptoms, you should be tested and make sure that you are tested. We appreciate you engaging in that, and also really recognizing the issues about comorbidities and making sure that we're addressing those. I had a series of great calls with about 17 states that are in our more rural areas, specifically around our indigenous people and tribal nations. It was a very reassuring call, and we are testing across the country. We do have about 63% of states that have less than 10% positive despite significant testing. And within the indigenous peoples and tribal nations, they're seeing the same thing that we're seeing across the nation. Increased issues among those with comorbidities and those of elderly, but also issues in nursing homes. And so they are testing, many of these states are still capable of doing full contact tracing. And so they've been doing contact tracing from nursing home outbreaks and other outbreaks. It really gives us a clear impression of no matter what we do in the future, we need to really ensure that nursing homes have sentinel surveillance. And what do I mean by that? That we're actively testing in nursing homes, both the residents and the workers at all times. That is where, and that's how we saw this at the beginning. That's what we saw in Washington State. And that's what we're seeing in many of the states that have very low case attack rates. The other thing that I want to leave you with, we certainly know how desperate and difficult the situation has been in New York over the last few weeks. And we've been telling and talking about how this would be the week that would be most difficult because of the large proportion of cases that are coming from the New York metro area. What's been encouraging to us, those early states outside of Washington and California, which still have extraordinarily low attack rates because of their level of mitigation, all of the new areas that are having new increasing cases, we talked about them yesterday, Washington and Baltimore and the Philadelphia metro area, that includes Camden, Wilmington, and the counties around Philadelphia. We're seeing that the case numbers, what we'll get to as far as attack rates, we talked about 1 in 7 in 1,000 in New York that are being measured. These are coming in even with their progress up their curve in the 1 to 2 per 1,000 range, showing that when you start mitigation early, it has a very different impact. All of this data is coming together, the testing rates, the seropositivity, the age groups, who really needs hospitalization, ICU, the innovative pieces coming from, we heard a great report from Louisiana this morning on the phone call where they talked about a minimum now of 40% of people coming off of ventilators alive and leaving the hospital. This is very encouraging to us, really shows amazing progress clinically at each of these hospitals and the real lessons what we're learning and sharing across hospitals. but really shows us that the original outbreaks were very large, but the newer ones that we talk about in Washington and Philadelphia and Baltimore, it looks like their attack rates and the attack rates in Denver and some of these other states that we have been talking about are much lower than New York and New Jersey. And this gives us hope about really understanding how to integrate this information together, not dealing with a model, but the real life cases that are occurring and understanding how to move forward together to really have a different future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. So just reflecting about what we've been doing over the last few days, remember last weekend when we made the forecast that this would really be a bad week? As I mentioned yesterday and the day before, it is, in the sense of deaths, a bad week. In fact, every day there seems to be a record of number of deaths compared to the day before. In fact, New York today had, again, another record of, I think the city itself was about 820 plus deaths. But what we were predicting with the increase and the real adherence to the physical separation, the guidelines that the Vice President talks about, the physical separation, at the same time as we're seeing the increase in deaths, we're seeing rather dramatic decrease in the need for hospitalizations. Like I think yesterday was something like 200 new hospitalizations, and it's been as high as 1,400 at any given time. So that is going in the right direction. I say that, and I always remind myself when I say that, that means that what we are doing is working, and therefore we need to continue to do it. I know I sound like a broken record. That's good. I want to sound like a broken record. Let's just keep doing it. I get questions a lot, Dr. Birx and I, about these numbers, the projections that you went with from 100,000, 200,000, now down to 60,000. That's a sign that when, as I keep saying, when you take the data you have and you reinsert it into the model modifies. Data is real, model is hypothesis, okay? So that's what you have to do, and that's what I think we're seeing. The other thing that's some just broad general good news from the standpoint of a scientific standpoint, that there are a lot of candidate potential therapeutics that are going into clinical trials now that we're sponsoring at the NIH, the kinds of clinical trials that will give us the answer. Are they safe? Are they effective? And just what is the capability of using them under what circumstances, as prophylaxis, as treatment, in early disease, in late disease. So as the time goes by and we have the public health measures to try and contain this, we're doing an awful lot from a scientific standpoint so that when we do get to next year, next fall, next winter, hopefully we'll have something that we can offer in addition to the very important public health measures. So I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Vice President, thank you, and thanks to the task force, and of course thanks to the President for his leadership. The important public health measures that have been discussed so much in these briefings in this room have had a large impact in American workplaces. We saw that again today as the Labor Department released figures showing that 6.6 million new unemployment claims were filed last week. We're all mindful, the President mentioned this, that the American people are making difficult sacrifices. That has included being furloughed, laid off, or having a small business struggle. That said, American workers can be encouraged by how swiftly and comprehensively the President and Congress have responded. 3 weeks ago, the U.S. had never had a law requiring paid sick leave at U.S. companies. But 3 weeks ago, the President signed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which did provide paid sick leave, as well as expanded family and medical leave for employees at small businesses, with those small businesses being reimbursed dollar for dollar for having provided that leave. Last week, we at the Labor Department issued rules to implement these leave requirements of the Families First Act, and we've been in near constant contact with employers and employees to help them understand the law, and in a number of cases already, to help workers get the leave that they were entitled to. Another unprecedented benefit for workers was provided in the CARES Act less than 2 weeks ago. That law, as you know, includes a $600 a week plus-up to unemployment benefits that are provided by the states. We have millions of unemployed Americans who are making a sacrifice for our national well-being. These bonus payments, and they're unprecedented, the government has never provided a plus-up unemployment payment like this. These payments are intended to make those workers whole as near we can. This temporary benefit is available not just to employees, but also to the self-employed and gig economy workers. Before the president signed the CARES Act, gig workers, independent contractors were not available for unemployment compensation. Today they are. At the department, our team has worked day and night to enable states to make this benefit available. I'm pleased that a number of states are now making those $600 additional weekly payments. More states will follow in the coming days. How long it takes will vary by states. Some states' systems will take longer, but we at the department will continue to support them. We have already dispersed $500 million to states to help them with their systems and making these payments. We have another $500 million that we're ready to release. And for workers who don't get this benefit when it's first due them, states will be able to catch them up later when their computer systems are able to make these payments. Let me add that we're also mindful at the Labor Department that many Americans remain in the workplace, including on the front lines in our hospitals, as well as our emergency responders. My department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, has been providing guidance to employers and employees on coronavirus since the early days of this health emergency. We are fielding and responding to calls from workers worried about their health, and sometimes from workers who believe they've been illegally disciplined by their employer for expressing health concerns. We will not tolerate retaliation. OSHA will continue to work with workers and employers to keep workplaces safe, using all the tools available to us, including enforcement if needed. I wanted to finish by commenting on the Paycheck Protection Program, which we heard about earlier, run by the Small Business Administration. This, of course, is loans to small businesses to enable them to meet certain costs, including utilities, rent, and, most important from my perspective, payroll. As you know, if these companies receiving the loans keep their workers on payroll, these loans are largely forgivable. Here's why that program is so important from my perspective. We're seeing unemployment filings right now of the like that we've never seen before. But these numbers aren't the result of an underlying weakness to our economy. Our economy has been vibrant, incredibly strong just weeks ago. If, as we've heard again today, if we are disciplined now and adhere carefully to the guidance being provided by health authorities, we'll get that economy back. The president spoke at the State of the Union of the blue-collar boom we are experiencing. We want to lay the groundwork now for a blue-collar bounce back. We'll get there in part by helping companies hold on to their workers, which is what the Paycheck Protection Program does. Keep them on payroll so that when businesses are ready to reopen, they have the workers they need and Americans have jobs. We will continue at the department, and I know here at the White House, to be laser focused on American workers and jobs until this is done. So thank you very much.
Very well done. Thank you. Great job. Great. We'll take a few questions. Yes, please.
Mr. Vice President, a question for you and then a question for Dr. Birx or Dr. Fauci. Just to clarify, on the federal funding for testing sites in the states, are you saying that federal funding will remain for those sites, and will it remain at its current levels?
It's not merely federal funding, but in many cases we provided personnel from the U.S. Public Health Service and also flowed supplies, personal protective equipment that was required for some of the early forms of testing, but it's less required today with new formats for testing. But it is an option, and as I've made clear to several governors, we'll continue to partner with our states. But I have to tell you that the way states step forward with the concept of drive-through and community-based testing is really inspiring. For our part, working with FEMA and our great team at the U.S. Public Health Service. We've stood up some nearly 50 different drive-through test sites around the country, but literally there are hundreds that have been deployed by states and by hospitals and local healthcare providers. But in this instance, we wanted to at least give them the option to take control of that, but we'll continue to resource them with personnel, supplies, and any other support that they need going forward. And
Then just a question for the doctors. I'm curious, did you see this information out of the CDC in South Korea today that shows that they're seeing evidence of reinfection in some people who had been cured of coronavirus? And what does that mean for our understanding of this?
have you seen that?
I'm not aware of what you're speaking about now, but clearly there have been anecdotal mentioning of what appear to be reinfection. You have to really be very careful when you say reinfection, because what and we were dealing with this with even Ebola back during the Ebola time, that someone might still, when someone does a test on them, do a PCR on a body fluid of some sort and be able to detect what are likely nucleotides that are not replication competent. So if you're telling me, which I don't think they're saying, that someone has coronavirus disease, they get sick, it's documented, they get better, and then a month or so later, they get sick with documented coronavirus disease. I don't think that's what they're saying, but I don't want to jump the gun on it until I see the data.
They use the word reactivate. Is that different?
Yeah. Well, yeah, what reactivating what means is that it depends what you mean by reactivating. If someone clearly is ill and they have virus isolated from them, that you may have a prolonged course. I'd like to see how long they reactivate. I mean, if they were sick and had documented virus, and then 3 months later they had documented virus, is that reactivation or is that infection with another virus? I'd like to see the data before I really comment on that. Yeah.
Dr. Fauci, I wanted to ask about medical criteria. You had a discussion with Dr. Birx and the other public health experts on Tuesday, I understand. Can you discuss what is the medical criteria that you guys are discussing in order to reopen the government? What is the medical criteria?
Well, it's less medical criteria than it is public health criteria. And that is, and I think it's really important because often people say reopen the government like it's a light switch that goes on and off for the entire country. We have a very large country with really different patterns of disease and outbreaks in different parts of the country. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. It's going to be, what is the kinetics of an outbreak? Is it on the way down? Is it essentially out? Is it still smoldering and possibly going up? I think you're going to have to take it individually. And
are there some benchmarks that you're looking at, though? I mean, are there some numbers that you're looking at, some data that you would like to see? What would you like to see before that happens?
Yeah, well, I will allow Dr. Birx to come up with just my own opinion. I don't think they're going to be benchmarks that are going to be consistent from one to the other. For example, I would not want to pull back at all in New York until I was clear that that curve really was doing what we've seen in other countries, a very steep decline down, and we had the capability, if there was a resurgence, of having everything in place to be able to do the containment as opposed to struggling with mitigation with what we've been doing. That's different than a relatively smaller city, town, or whatever you, in the Midwest or mountain regions, which is generally very well controlled. What I would want to see, do we have the capability of doing the isolation, contact tracing, and suppression of it? So it really varies differently. So I don't think there's one medical criteria. But Deb, if you want to speak to it.
Thank you. It's what I tried to cover in the brief presentation I gave. In talking to the 17 states that have indigenous populations and tribal nations and discussing with them what they were doing generally and what they were doing specifically through the Indian Health Service, they discussed the ability to find new cases and doing full contact tracing. And so they have strike teams. They are very well organized. You don't hear about them every day, and that's why I wanted to call them out. They're really doing amazing work at their public health institutions with their governors and their mayors, and they are in full contact tracing. Yes, they're doing social distancing, but they're also doing full contact tracing and understanding all aspects of their epidemic. So we're looking at those pieces, as well as when I was talking about blunting, really when you're starting to go up that curve, having that unbelievable blunting where you only get evident attack rates, and I want to be very clear about that. When we see cases, these are symptomatics that have been diagnosed. There's clearly, we believe, people we don't see. And that's why the antibody test is going to be helpful to us to really define that. So those are the pieces that we're bringing together to really analyze that. I did want to say the president talks about the 150 plus countries that are experience what we're experiencing. I just wanted to do a call out. We have Americans around the world in every embassy that are working with those countries now. This scarf came from Africa. It's one of my public health colleagues there. I just want to recognize the public health colleagues around the world who are doing all of this work together to change the course in their epidemics in every single country around the globe.
Let me go to another question if I can, but in response to that, just so you know, what the president's tasked us to do is there's a number of working groups and that are looking at not only how do we reopen the country, but how do we stay open, and I think most of America knows that no one wants to reopen America more than President Donald Trump, but the president's told us we need to do it responsibly, and we're going to follow the data. We're literally following the data on a county-by-county basis. This morning, we were literally presented with information of each county that had more than 100 new cases and had, went in the other direction, had, less than 100 than the day before. It's really remarkable. And so I think what you hear the health experts saying will inform the president's decision and timing. But make no mistake about it, that the best thing we can do to reopen America is put the coronavirus behind us, to reach the end of that curve with as little loss of life or hardship as possible, to have in place that we soon believe we will, the kind of therapeutics, I call them medicines that make you feel better, by this summer, to have more widespread testing that we're scaling up each and every day, and also to have the kind of guidance that the CDC is even now developing for businesses large and small, for families and for schools, for that day that we do reopen America. Question? Go ahead.
I'm going to ask one more follow-up to the doctors. Touches on this question of when to lean back on mitigation. There is a study out of Los Alamos this week that I hope you've seen. It's on the CDC website that looks at this question of R naught, which is a technical term that you understand that has to do with the reproductive rate of the virus. The study shows that the R naught for coronavirus isn't between 2 and 3, as had been thought before, but it's actually closer to 6, which means that one person on average is infecting 6 others. So with this information, how does that impact the model? How can you begin to think about when to reopen society if it's more contagious than we thought before?
Well, I can tell you as the layperson on the stage.
Go for it.
We have known from the beginning that this is at least 3 times more contagious than the flu. And I believe that fact alone has informed our projections and the modeling, but now I'll let the experts respond.
I'll go quickly and then we'll tag team together. So when we've been talking about the asymptomatic group, and that's why I gave you that testing data where 11% of young people under 25 were positive, many of them very low-grade symptoms. What we will be triangulating for you is the testing data with hospital admissions, and then you'll be able to start seeing spectrum of disease. Because what you're not seeing in spectrum of disease is people who never even think that this is something significant, that what they have. We're seeing the significant cases. In testing, you can see that we're getting a lot of people in with symptoms aren't positive. And so really finding out what is the R naught. Is it 6? Is it 5? And the only way to do that at this point right now is to get the antibody tests out there and go into these places that had significant disease. When we talk about attack rates of 7 per 1,000 like New York and 5 per 1,000 in New Jersey, and test the healthcare workers, the first responders, all of the nursing homes for antibody, and really get to your question. Because right now it's still theoretic. We understand they're modeling this, and we will get the data to actually look at that. You will see what others have been presenting. So you presented the 6. What others are presenting, importantly, is they're modeling what's happening with mitigation, and they're publishing that the R naught with mitigation is approaching like 1.3 and 1.5. So that, think of what that is. If it was 6, and then with mitigation, we have it into the 1s. That really shows the power of the American people. No one has varied R naughts like that without a vaccine. But this is what's happening with really the power of the American people. Tony?
Ditto to everything that Dr. Birx said, but I couldn't help but thinking when you talk about, you know what the worst enemy of an R naught is? Physical separation.
How about one more?
But do we have
One more. Go right ahead.
testing capacity in the country right now to reopen in the foreseeable future? I mean, because the president talked about 2 million tests. Are we going to have the testing capacity needed to make Americans feel comfortable going back into their workplaces? I mean, it seems to me that is a pretty critical question at this point. People are not going to want to go back to work if they think their coworkers might be carrying the virus. If we're not testing enough, how do we know it's safe to go back?
Well, I think the American people see the incredible progress that's been made after President Trump brought in the largest commercial labs in the world to scale testing, the likes of which we've seen. We are, as Dr. Birx said, well over 100,000 Americans being tested every single day. We have an antibody test that is coming online. Abbott Laboratories literally has thousands of machines across the country. We're working with hospitals and labs around the country to activate those machines for the 15-minute test.
Do we have enough testing right now?
Well, let me say we're moving every day toward meeting that moment. But let's be clear: reopening the country, as the president is very anxious to do at the earliest responsible moment, will be through a combination of facts. First would be that we are at the end of the coronavirus for most major communities. Another piece of that is that we have therapeutics for Americans to take medicines if they contract the disease. Another piece of that is guidance from the CDC to public institutions, to businesses large and small, about how to conduct themselves in a safe and a responsible way. And testing is also a piece of that. And as Admiral Joie has reflected, we are spending a great deal of time expanding testing today. Every single day there's more and more tests across the country. But we're also working to scale testing that as we move into this summer and move into the fall, we'll have the testing we need to do what these doctors call not diagnostic testing, which is to take a test of a person that has symptoms, but surveillance testing, so we can identify people that may have had it and may be immune, versus people people that we just need to know whether or not they were ever exposed or and were not exposed. How about one more quick question here, if I can? I think he had one right here, or I'll go to you in the back.
Mr. Vice President, in the next few weeks, the Supreme Court is set to rule on DACA and on the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, and about 30,000 of those people who are under that program are frontline healthcare workers. Is the administration in any way ready to protect them if the ruling comes in your favor and takes the protection out and they can no longer work in the health field as they're needed right now?
Well, I think the president's been very clear on his desire to reach a solution on that issue with the Congress. But let me say, whether it be healthcare workers or people working in food supply, other people working in critical infrastructure, we're incredibly inspired by the way people across this country are stepping up to keep healthcare rolling and available, a high quality of care, even in areas deeply impacted by the coronavirus. And also, as we said the other day, hardworking people in our food supply, from the farmers to processors to distributors to truck drivers to grocers. We received a good word that over the last several days we've actually seen a significant drop with one major company in absenteeism. We issued new guidance from the CDC about how people who may have been within close proximity to someone who had the coronavirus could return to work before the 14 days if they didn't have a fever, if they tested themselves twice a day and returned with a mask. But the dedication of people to continue to work is truly inspiring. And I know as we go forward, we'll work through a broad range of national issues, but we're going to be incredibly proud for a long time about the way people all across this country responded to this moment. So thank you all very much. We'll see you tomorrow.
And hello, everybody. Hello, kids. We're live. I have my fan running here. Let me lower that so I don't sound like I'm in a wind tunnel. How's everybody doing? How's everybody surviving the stay at home and all that stuff? I got this time down perfectly somehow today. Right at the end of the presser, boom. Episode 33 of The Abyss. Hello. All right. So as usual, I want to say a big hello to everybody watching on all the different platforms that I am on. So I want to say hello first and foremost to everybody on Bitwave, the primary platform that I find myself on usually. Then of course I want to say hello to all the folks on YouTube, DLive, and Periscope. I'm not doing anything right now on Twitch because I think I want to transition back to just doing gaming stuff on Twitch. I haven't done any sort of gaming streaming in a while, and I think it would be nice for me to do that because I do enjoy some of the non-politics stuff sometimes. You know, you can't always dive into politics. So, hello. So obviously, like, the big topic du jour is the usual mumbo jumbo. No, not die or next, Fanny Abdabs. But there's some actual big news outside of the coronavirus, believe it or not, that has been happening in the news and actually made it in the news. It bubbled up. So there's a few more stuff going on that I can actually talk about that is outside the scope of we're all gonna die kind of thing, right? So I thought I'd dive right into that. But before I do, I must shill. I must promote. Go to my pinned tweet on Twitter, twitter.com/theeternalabyss with only one S at the end. And you'll see all the social media platforms that I'm on and all the video platforms that I stream on and or archive on. So please make sure you follow, you subscribe, you actually, there was one thing I wanted to do real quick. 1 second here. I almost forgot. I want to make sure that I have something. Here we go. Let's do that. Computer's going to be running a little slower than usual because it's going to be running hot because I got to keep the fans shut off because unless I want to sound like I'm in a wind tunnel. So we need to avoid that. Come on, load. Sorry, this just take a second here. But as I was saying, while I'm getting this all situated, please go ahead and go to that Twitter, to my Twitter page. Follow on all the social media platforms I'm on. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Minds.com. I'm on Parler or Parlay, and I am on Gab. You definitely want to get on Gab. That's the platform for free speech. Wow, this is just running so slow. What the heck is going on? Good Lord. This is pretty crazy. Really, really crazy. As well as, you know, subscribe, share, follow, and hit any notification icons for YouTube, for BitChute. Join up here on Bitwave or DLive, and make sure that you get notified whenever a episode is going to start here, because I'm usually good about keeping things pretty much on schedule, but I can't always promise that I'll be on schedule. For the Thursday shows, I'm still reworking the daily stream that I was doing, because I was doing a morning show, but it's a little bit too early for me, so I can't I can't get up that early. So we're gonna have to figure out what to do for that, and you know, we'll do what we can. But we're gonna go right into the meat and potatoes of my little episode today. As I mentioned, there's some other news that actually aren't just we're all gonna die, pandemic, wear a mask, wash your hands, don't lick subway poles. And that's about the 2020 election cycle here. It looks like Biden's the man. Biden is gonna be the Democrat candidate. Because guess who dropped out? That's right. Bernie the commie. He dropped out again. He was denied the nomination before, and he's pretty much going to get denied again. He dropped out. Left the field wide open now for Biden to just swoop in, presuming he knows where he is, and to get in there and you know, try and run against President Trump. But the irony is this, and well, I don't know about irony, but the funny thing is this. In his little video announcement, Bernie said he was going to hold on to his delegates. So that's an unusual thing. I find that a bit unusual that he's planning on just dropping out of the race, but keeping his delegates. So I don't know. I find that very strange. Excuse the sniffling. I have sinus issues right now. And it's making me want to sneeze, and I'm trying not to sneeze. So I have an epic battle here happening. A battle of biblical proportions happening in my nose right now. So it's going to probably affect how I sound. And I'm going to be sniffling a little bit. I have sinus issues right now. So we got that going here. Whoop, the heck. There we go. Okay. Just checking chat because I saw a couple people mention a few things here. Bernie couldn't hang with his own socialism. Shelter in place. Yeah, that's kind of the irony. Yeah, it's no fun, Mom Patch. Hi, Mom Patch, by the way. Yeah, no fun at all dealing with sinuses, and I find it hilarious that he's finally tasting what socialism really is. Because it's not, I mean, a lot of people have been saying that, and granted, what we're experiencing right now, it's not like it's true socialism. It's not like we have a real totalitarian government that can come in, arrest you for being a dissident, not being able to express yourself, you know, removing your right to free speech and other stuff. But we do have some pretty interesting stuff happening in terms of how, and that was one thing I wanted to even talk about, but like how the government has really, at the state and federal level, really done, like some governors have really overstretched their authorities, in my opinion. There's a thin line about that. I mean, I understand some of the reasoning behind it, and it is in some cases for public health reasons. I get that. But then you hear certain things that are kind of contradictory, and you hear certain things that are kind of weird about that. So, it's a little strange when it comes to that sort of thing. But essentially, Bernie's out, and all the Bernie bros are crying. You had the hashtag Rip Bernie, which I thought for a second he had caught the virus when I saw the hashtag at first. I was like, what the hell? Did he die? What's going on? I mean, the guy had a heart attack. He's the kind of person that if he would catch this thing, it would be really bad for him. And I don't hope for that to happen to anybody. As much as I despise his ideology, I'm not the kind of person to wish ill on quote unquote my enemies, if you want to even call it that. I'm not that kind of person. I don't wish ill upon people. It's not very Catholic to do that, so I don't believe in doing that. So we'll see what happens now. You have CNN running their fake polls now, and they're saying, oh, Biden's 54 and Trump is 49 or whatever in terms of their ridiculous election polls, which I don't even see how that's possible. Biden has not been really out there in terms of campaigning. He's been holed up in his mansion, which is understandable because everybody has to stay at home right now. He's doing these virtual town halls that he can't even string two words together. The guy doesn't even know what state he's in half the time. And it's ridiculous that to even think that somehow he's gaining numbers or he's gaining popularity or he's gaining, while most people actually, the polls are, there are polls showing that Trump has a high approval rating on how he's handling the coronavirus thing. And once this thing ends, and it will end, excuse me, and the economy will bounce back. It may take, certain industries may take slower to come back, but overall, in general, the industry will probably come back up. I don't see why it wouldn't. So, oh yeah, actually, I'm sorry, I forgot. There was one more thing I needed to do here. Let's see. Oh, this stupid phone. Sorry, I forgot. I needed to turn something off on my phone here. Do. Okay, that should do it. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I wanted to make sure that was turned off so there wouldn't be any interruption. Just in case someone tries to contact me or what have you while I'm doing the stream. Because I want to try and keep this semi-professional. Semi, at least, you know. Speaking of semi-professional, a funny thing that I read was the Gap, you know, the clothing store, the Gap. They put out a report on the fact that shirt purchases had gone up, but pants purchases had gone down. So apparently, a lot of people aren't wearing pants, but I do assure you, I am wearing pants right now. So there you go. Hey, if everybody's at home and all you're seeing in meetings is above the waist, I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? So I just found that funny, that's all. So I thought I'd share. But beyond that, moving on. Yeah, what we're experiencing right now is somewhat of a it's kind of like a martial law. It's kind of a socialism. It's kind of a overreach. And what I was talking about in terms of some weird contradictions that you experience or you hear is that, for example, you got Bill de Blasio. I think it was a couple weeks ago this happened. I didn't really talk about it in my other streams, but about 2 weeks ago, he talked about how people can't go to church. You can't go and worship at a church because you can't have too many people gathering together. And he said that people can't do that, but for some reason, he excluded Muslims. He excluded those visiting a mosque for their services or prayer. And that was very odd, because if you're going to do that, why only target Christians? Why only target like Jewish temples? Like, why only target those that are non-Muslim? That was like very weird. And there's two sides to look at that. One side is, well, it's kind of strange and surreal and almost frightening how easy a government can take away your right to worship, using the claim of a health problem that we're experiencing. You know, it's frightening to think that a government could use a national health crisis to just go, boom, no, you can't go to church anymore. That's scary to me, that a government can circumvent the First Amendment that quickly. Yes, it's a very sneaky tactic. On the other side of the coin, it's like, well, what's he got against Muslims? That he's okay with them getting all the coronavirus? I mean, I thought that was really funny. It's like, wait, you don't care if that group of people get all sick and die? Like, are you secretly anti-Muslim? Like, what's going on there? It was really weird. I wasn't sure what to think about it. It's unusual because people like de Blasio, they bend over and pretzel themselves all sorts of different directions to try and please these quote-unquote underrepresented groups, or these quote-unquote groups that are discriminated against and all that kind of stuff, which is nonsense. But I just thought it was hilarious. It was weird to me. It was funny, and I was like, well, okay. Makes you think. Makes you go, Other things that are in the news, and this has more to do with the pandemic that we're experiencing right now with the whole stay at home, is that you have the Prime Minister of the UK. He's in pretty bad shape. He caught the virus. He tested positive for it. He's in intensive care. He's not intubated, last I heard, but he is on oxygen and he's in intensive care. So he's in kind of rough shape. And I hope that and I just hope that Boris Johnson does well. I really do. Troll for NDA, what are you talking about? I was talking about de Blasio. I wasn't talking about Trump. So I really don't know what you're talking about. So I really don't know what you're talking about when you say that Abyss has just discovered that Trump is a Jewish puppet. I really don't know. But it's kind of sad news to hear that Boris Johnson, he's in that kind of bad shape. It's not fun to hear that kind of stuff, and it's a shame. It's a real shame. And I do wish him well. It wouldn't be good for the English people to lose Boris Johnson, especially now that Brexit he finally made Brexit basically happen. It was thanks to him. And it would be a shame for them to lose him in this time. And so my well wishes to the UK people, Boris Johnson's family, and to Boris Johnson himself, of course. I hope for the best. You know, prayers, thoughts, and I hope that he makes a full recovery. And from the silver lining is that they didn't need to intubate him or anything like that. So at least there's that. You know, at least there's that kind of silver lining to his situation. My computer is running so slow, and it's because I can't run my fan high, because then I'll sound like I'm in a wind tunnel. So this is a I gotta figure out a way to keep my laptop cool while I'm doing these streams, because this is not good. Nope, not good at all. But anyways, my technical woes aren't that important right now. As long as the stream is running and people can see and hear me, we're all good, aren't we? So there's been a lot of controversy as well. Speaking of people getting sick, there's been a lot of controversy over, at least fake controversy, because there's not really that much controversy. It's all fake controversy by the folks running the propaganda arm of the DNC. People like folks at CNN, people at MSNBC, Vox, fake news outlets. That's really who's causing this sort of controversy over something that really is not. Excuse me. It's just it's all about hydroxychloroquine. And we talked about this in the last stream. There's been some talk about that, and there's been reports out about how folks on hydroxychloroquine, that they do very well with the drug, with that cocktail of that drug, as well as azithromycin. That cocktail apparently works very well in helping people overcome this virus. And it does help people who have just started feeling the symptoms. It helps them more, of course. People who have more advanced symptoms, it's not as effective, but it's still helpful. And I would say, regardless, give it to them. And Trump has been saying, you know, they've been wanting to get this situated. And you have idiots like Nancy Pelosi saying that she wants to investigate Trump and possibly do another impeachment because he's doing that to enrich himself. He's investing in that drug, so he's pushing that to enrich himself. And it's just the stupidest thing possible to say during this kind of time. It's irresponsible, first of all. It's not just horrible. It's super irresponsible. It's dangerous. You're pushing something that can lead to people to die when you're saying don't use this drug that could help you. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? We talked about this in the last stream where the governor of Michigan had banned the use of hydroxychloroquine. And then after pressure from all sides, basically, and the FDA approving use of it, she had to back out. And I know on good authority that hospitals had pretty much given her secretly the middle finger that they were still giving people that medicine. They didn't care. They told her essentially to jump out the window. She wasn't aware, or maybe eventually the information got to her that people were using it anyway, so her ban was pointless. But that kills people. When you act in such a stupid way, you're killing people. Okay? That is not good. That is absolutely not good. And the fact that this half-wit of a governor, essentially we're putting the lives of Michigan folk in danger that way. She should be removed from office just for that, in my opinion. That right there shows you how incapable this person is of being a leader of a state or being in any leadership position. She should not have any decision-making power on anything. Absolutely not. Neither should Pelosi. Neither should people like Schiff that are putting committees together to investigate the response, the coronavirus response, like it's a 9/11 commission. This is disgusting. That they are playing politics when people's lives are on the line, when people have lost their jobs, have lost their incomes. I know people personally that have lost their jobs because of this whole thing. And if this thing continues, a lot more people will lose their jobs. These are precarious times we live in right now. And what people should be doing in politics right now, all of our senates and representatives should put aside all this partisan bullcrap and say, you know what, we need to focus on getting America back on track. We need to get people back as soon as possible. And the media as well is absolutely irresponsible that they keep saying and they keep pushing back on the administration when, like, even in this presser that you just saw, they're like, how can you talk about opening the United States and blah, 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 blah. It's like, dude, people need to get back to work. We need to get the economy back rolling where it was. We can't delay this indefinitely just because you want to win an election. Excuse me. Or you have a personal agenda that you want to push. This is dangerous, what these people are doing. It is absolutely dangerous, irresponsible, immature, and partisan. And it's antithetical to what it means to be an American, in my opinion. So I think it's not good. I don't think it's good, and I think that the administration has been doing the right thing and trying to get people situated and trying to get people back into work as soon as possible. Because we have to. We have to. We cannot keep our country like this indefinitely. I am seriously hoping that by May, things will come back. Things will start to come back. I don't expect things to be up and running as they were by May. But I am seriously hoping that by Easter you have good numbers, that we're seeing flattening of curves. By the end of the month, we're hoping to see those numbers go down. And by May, you'll start seeing people slowly going back into their offices. And you see stores, non-essentials, quote unquote, starting to open up again. Some retail stores, some restaurants where people can sit and eat. They're rolling out soon the antibody test to see for people who already caught it. If they already caught it, they can go out again. You know? So it's good. I think it's a good thing that there's a positive prospect moving ahead. I think it's a good thing that the goal is to get people back to normalcy. You know? Yeah, Mom Patch, I agree. Yeah, I've seen some people like Dr. Shiva, like you said, Dr. Shiva. I need to scroll up because Spoob is spamming chat here. Dude, quit it. I can't even find what happened anymore here. Because people have to just be ridiculous in chat, right? I have no idea where that chat was, Mom Patch, anymore. But I saw what you said about how there were certain doctors calling people out on it. I agree. And there's not a lot of people doing that, and I think more people need to do that. I really do. I really do. And I think that the more people, you know what? I'm just gonna have to, at least for me, I apologize for the viewers, but I'm going to have to put Spoob on ignore if he keeps spamming ants. Though I'd hate to do that because he's breaking my chat. Yep, I'm going to have to do that because I can't have my chat get broken. So again, I apologize for the people watching. I mean, folks watching won't be able to avoid the ants, but at least I can see if people are talking to me here. And I'm going to have to ignore Maxine Waters as well. Thank you. All right. So, Who's doing that? Come on, Murderer, really? I'm gonna have to put you on ignore if you do that, man. Just saying. Whoa. I over-scrolled. I mean, I don't want to ignore people, I don't want to block people, but I have to see what people, if people are interacting with me, I do need to have that in my chat. Like, I need to be able to see that. That's all. And I'll unignore you once my stream is done. Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to put you on ignore, Murderer. Sorry. I'd hate to do that. You know, that's a good question, Mom Patch. Mom Patch says, I don't understand why Target, Walmart, Home Depot have to have people line up to enter the stores, yet small businesses can't do the same. That's a very good point. I do think that there's not a consistency of how things are being applied to people, and I think that's a problem. I do feel that there should be more of a consistent way of dealing with this sort of thing to allow people to go into stores, do what they need to do. I honestly, at least from where I've gone to, I haven't seen any big lines, which is interesting. I haven't seen that. So I find that rather fascinating. Sorry, I just gotta do one more thing here in chat because wait a minute. Nope, I gotta do this. Install app. That's new. Oh. Geez, this thing is just running really slow here. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, never mind. I was looking at my settings here for a second. But anyways. So yeah, I feel that there are certain things that stores can do, restaurants can do, that would make things a little better. I think it's also very location dependent. Certain locations are more affected by this while others are not. I've noticed I've been hearing, for example, in very concentrated cities like New York, Chicago, things like that, you are going to have very long lines because you have a large concentration of folks that are there. But at the same time, you have places that are more out in the middle of nowhere where you don't really have huge lines happening and you don't have the biggest impact whatsoever when it comes to this whole coronavirus thing. So it's kind of a half and half. It's a crapshoot. And it's interesting when you think about that as well, because you would think that if they apply a standard or they apply a rule to certain groups, it should apply, like certain stores, it should apply to everybody equally, but they don't do that. And I do find that interesting. But one of the interesting news that, like I was mentioning about the hydroxychloroquine that's making a big deal, you actually had a Democrat, I forgot to mention this, so I want to make sure I do. You actually had a Democrat that went on CNN and went on the news and started saying, hey, it's a state representative of Michigan, since we were talking about Michigan, Karen Whitsett. She actually credits Trump for saving her life. Because she got the coronavirus, she used the hydroxychloroquine, and she said that Trump helped save her life. So, wonderful for her. I agree with that, Mom Patch. If other stores were opened up, there would be less impact on the big ones, yeah. In fact, that's one recommendation that I would probably give people is, if you have the possibility of going to a Walmart or a Target or a store or supermarket that is in a less populated area versus a more dense populated area, I would recommend that because you'll find more stuff, you can social distance better, and you don't have to necessarily stand in lines. You just go in, do what you need to do, and you get out relatively quick. So I think it's a good thing overall. Another thing, speaking of going back to the martial law thing, another news item that I saw that disturbed me a little bit was that in New Jersey, you had a police stop a woman who was driving, and she yeah, that was an interesting case, Mom Patch, about the therapeutics versus synthetic meds. That's true. So that is also something interesting to look into. But as I was going back to what I was mentioning real quick, you had a cop in New Jersey pulled over a woman, I believe, who was she was the first, no, I'm sorry, not New Jersey, my bad, Pennsylvania. She was the first woman to get a $200 fine because she was driving during this stay at home. Which I find interesting for two reasons. The first reason is the fact that it's the first person that got this ticket and it got reported in the news and everything like that. The second is that she actually got fined for this. And the thing is, she was in a car. It's not like she was, I don't think it was a convertible. It's not like she was, driving around coughing in a convertible or anything like that. If you're in a car and you're just driving, I don't see why that would necessarily be something worth a violation. I think that may have been a case of an overzealous policeman. I don't know. I find that very strange. I don't know all the details about it, but I do find it very strange. In New Jersey, what happened was exactly, she was alone in her car. Exactly. It doesn't make sense to me why the policeman got so uppity about it that he had to give her a $200 fine for breaking the stay-at-home thing. I don't know. I don't quite understand the details of that. So maybe in the future some more information will come out. She'll probably fight this, as she should. So we'll see what happens with that. I think that that's just a weird situation overall. But again, that goes back into the whole kind of martial law socialism thing that we're experiencing right now. I think authorities are exerting a lot of power, and again, on one side, I get it. We are experiencing a national health crisis. I get that. I absolutely get that. And I want people to stay safe. I want people to social distance. I want people to not spread this thing. At the same time, you gotta start wondering. It's like why is government so eager to jump into this power grab? Why are they giving people tickets in this sort of scenario? Where in New Jersey, for example, this makes more sense to me. A story that happened in New Jersey is that this guy, this band, a Pink Floyd cover band, were doing a performance on their porch, and like 30 people had gathered. And the New Jersey, this guitarist was doing this little performance. They charged them, and I think maybe it was excessive what they did, that they charged him with a crime or something like that. I don't think that was necessary. In that case, maybe a fine would have been sufficient. But in this case, I can actually understand why the police would act on it, because you actually gathered people together. You brought people weren't social distancing. You put a performance together. That I get. That I absolutely get. Oh, we have a Mike Lindell here in BitChat. I was not aware of that. Woohoo! My pillow, yay! Oh, anyways. Oh my god. Yeah. And this is something that I just saw, and I liked the image that this was posted in a doctor's office where every election year had a disease. You know, he put these little facts together. I'm going to read them out to you here. Every election year has a disease. 2004 had SARS. 2008, there was the avian flu. 2010, swine flu. 2012 was MERS, MERS. 2014, Ebola. 2016, Zika. 2018, Ebola again. And 2020, Corona. Some other facts about the coronavirus. Coronavirus has a contagion factor of 2. SARS was 4. Measles is 18. I'm hearing now that some people are claiming that the contagion factor is of 6 of coronavirus. I am not sure if that's necessarily true, because just in this presser, what you heard. Yes, thank you, Mom Patch. Yeah, I just saw this more recently, so I'm just kind of going over it now. Mostly because, yeah, I know, right? What a coinkydink. But anyways, you have this contagion factor, which they talked about. I don't know if it was a cost or some other person was talking about the contagion factor actually being 6. And Dr. Bix actually kind of corrected him, saying, well, it's not so much the contagion factor, it's the fact that you have some people reporting versus some people not. You have men not going sooner, but rather later, while others don't. So I found that very interesting, which made me think of this image that I saw. And then the other interesting the very interesting fact about the virus is that it has a cure rate of about 99% or so. I mean, it has a very high cure rate for those under 50. And you have seen reports of that curve flattening out. There are good signs. There are good things happening. It's not going as fast as many people would want, of course, but it's happening, though. And another little tidbit that was put in this image is that this is a viral pneumonia being hyped as the Black Plague before an election, which that's the person's opinion. There's some truth to that. People were talking about this like it was the end of the world. You know, they were talking about this as this was another plague. Even Trump has mentioned, like, there was the great pandemic, I think it was of 1918. That's what was way worse than what we're experiencing now. And they didn't even shut everything down back then like we did now. I mean, we're approaching this completely differently from back then. You know? So, it makes you wonder. It does make you wonder how a lot of this stuff is politicized. I don't think it's made up or anything like that, obviously, because people are getting sick. This isn't the virus itself is not a hoax, and nobody ever claimed it was. Even though the media would say Trump claimed that the virus itself was a hoax, he never did. He said what the media was doing about what his response and his administration's response was a hoax. And I agree. It was hyperbolic, ridiculous, false, and making all sorts of ridiculous claims about how he was responding to it. And that's true, Mom Patch. I did hear that too. California is actually doing relatively well because they did start doing this early on. I was one of the people that said that I thought that they were overreacting. I still do believe that there is a level of overreaction, period. I will give kudos where kudos is due. I will give them credit that they did start early on. Maybe this taking it way too seriously, way too early on was a beneficial thing in the case of California. And you know what? Kudos to them if things are going better for them now. I have some folks that I know out in California, and I've heard some sort of crazy horror stories that even if they did start it early on, they were making some very stupid, poor decisions regardless. So, I mean, so you have a catch-22 there. But overall, in the United States, yeah, you have certain states like California, New York, even is starting to show signs of flattening. Things like that. So, I think that eventually we'll get back on track, I think. I think that eventually things will return to normalcy. And I do think that that we'll have the economy running back as it was. We'll have excuse me. We'll have people going back into the workforce. And we're going to be back basically to where we were for the most part. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't happen. Our economy was strong. There were signs that we have, even during this whole craziness, we have really, really good days in the market. So I do think that I do think we're at a good pace in terms of how things are going. I would love for things to speed up, honestly. I would love to see people back up and running way quicker than having to wait another 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe. You have people talking about how things are gonna get back to normal, like people are gonna start going back to work in August, for example, or in the fall. And I find that unacceptable. I can't imagine that it would have to resort to that. And sorry about the fan sound, but the computer's just running way too hot. I need to have my fan running. So I'll try and move my microphone closer to me and farther away from the computer. But anyways, we're reaching the end of my stream anyways. I want to thank everyone for watching. As I mentioned, I'm going to try and figure out what I'm going to do for a morning show or something like that. If I'm going to do it, I don't think a daily thing is in the books right now. I don't see that in the looking glass at the moment. It's just not really an ideal at this point in time. So we'll figure something out. But every Thursday between 7:30 and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to try and be here. We're going to talk about the latest and greatest of what we hear in the news and everything. And if you have interesting stories, or something that you want me to talk about, some interesting thing, definitely send them my way. I'm on all social media, so definitely find me on Twitter at The Eternal Abyss with 1 S. That's my handle on Twitter. My pinned tweet has all the other social media that I'm on. Parlay, Minds, Gab. I'm on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because subscriptions don't really mean anything on YouTube. They've been changing their terms of service constantly. They're making it very difficult for conservatives like myself to get a message out there. I've been getting hit by copyright strikes for no good reason. So it's ridiculous. But I am on those. I'm on Periscope. Follow me. Follow on Periscope. Follow on BitChute. Follow on DLive. So you don't miss the shows. And if you do miss the shows, BitTube does have I archive all my shows there. YouTube has an archive. I'm a little behind on my BitChute archive, I admit. I'm going to try and work on that as much as I can. And I want to thank everybody for watching and listening to me. I want to thank everyone at Bitwave and DLive and YouTube and Periscope. And I think we're going to call it a night, kids. And stay safe. Stay at home. Wash your hands. Don't lick subway poles or anything like that. Keep your tongue in your mouth. That's usually a good rule of thumb, I think. That's just my opinion. I'm not a doctor, but I feel that that's not bad advice in general. So, thanks for watching. Have a good night, everybody, and remember, kids, don't be complacent. You don't want to be complacent. That's how the other side wins. Good night.